In the last few classes, we had looked at the quarter car model. Remember that we reduced this from a half car model. We said that we would be cutting it into front and rear. It's possible to put them also together. And that we distributed the mass of this whole vehicle into two parts, the front and rear part. And we had what are the two loads we have, or two masses which we said? Unsprung and the sprung mass. Okay. So with unsprung and sprung mass, we were able to get certain equations which included the natural frequencies, okay, the two natural frequencies. Remember that we can look at this from a very traditional perspective from vibrational controls. We can also write down the characteristics equation. We can do all those things. In fact, we can express this whole thing in state space. Maybe if there's time, we'll do it in one of the later classes. Okay. So once we did this quarter car model, we also found out two natural frequencies, omega 1 and omega 2. And we said that these natural frequencies are spaced such that one of the natural frequencies, the first omega 1, the lower one, is between 1 to 1.5 hertz. Typically, they are 1 to 1.5 hertz, and has everything to do with the body of the vehicle. The second natural frequency, omega 2, we said that this is what is called as the wheel hop frequency, closer to around 12 hertz. Okay, and may vary between say 11 to 14 and so on. So these are the two natural frequencies. One of the difficulties we had, we wanted to now later go and look at, and we also developed, by the way, we also developed a simple equation for omega 1 and omega 2, taking into account undamped system. And when we talked about the damped systems, we had a difficulty in arriving at the optimum damping as well. One of the things we found is that the damping does not have a very uniform effect, okay, throughout, and that whatever be the damping, high or low, some of them had better results in one range and others had better results in the other range and so on. So we said that we went back to the 50s and we had one optimum damping. Okay. And that completes our 1 minute review of what we did. Then we moved over to what is called as the half car model. Right? So in half car model, we said that we will take a very simple case. We have, say for example, we are going to remove in fact the unsprung mass. We will consider only the sprung mass, and that the sprung mass ms, sorry, that's not sprung, that is ms, along with the moment of inertia perpendicular, that is j theta, would form the two variables, or two constants of the car, of the vehicle, and the variables are the bounce as well as the angle theta. We said that this is going to be supported on two springs, the front and the rear, and that we said we will remove also the unsprung mass, and that this is the equivalent springs when we take into account both the suspension as well as the tire. Simple model, yes, this is just to illustrate certain things. We can make it more complex. use the well-known MATLAB software in order to solve it and so on, write down the governing equations either in the state space form. By now you should be familiar as to how to write it in the state space form, and then you can solve it in a much more complex fashion. But I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to derive certain important aspects from a simple model, okay, which will be useful to you, which surprisingly gives very good results. It's not that the results are not accurate. The results are quite accurate. And we can use a simple model to understand certain aspects. If we had quickly reviewed that, let me write down the equation in the same form as I had done in the last class. Remember that that was A and that is B. Jy, sorry, we'll put that as Jy instead of J theta, Jy theta dot plus Kf A into Z plus A. That is the moment balance equation. So these two together are the Newton-Euler equations. Let's call, following Wong, let's call D1 as 1 by ms Kf plus Kr, D2 as 1 by ms Akf minus Bkr, and D3 is equal to 1 by Jy Kf A squared plus Kr B squared. Okay, and let's substitute this back into this expression, all algebra. So I'm just going to write down only the final results. Substitute it, and I'm going to write this down something like this. Of course, what we are doing is a free vibration problem, because I'm trying to find out the eigenvalues in the mode shapes. So as I told you in the last class, I'm going to look at the mode shapes. So that's what I'm going to do now. What I've essentially done is to calculate or replace Jy by means of m into Ry squared. Okay, mr squared is the moment of inertia term. Okay, so the radius of gyration Ry. So I've written this in this fashion. Okay, till now it's straight. There is nothing. Just going to substitute it. Look at this two equations. Obviously, it is coupled because, let's call this as 1 and 2, because both the equations has z and the theta term. So if I have to uncouple this equation, if this were to be uncoupled, which I said is not a very desirable quantity or desirable quality, what is that I should do? What is that I should do? If I put D2 to be equal to 0, obviously both these equations get uncoupled, which means that A into Kf is equal to B into Kr, then these two equations will get uncoupled. What is meant by uncoupling? Then in which case this body, which is our the sprung mass, would now start for the two frequencies which you would get, and for two frequencies, for one frequency there would only be a pure bounce mode, and for another there will be a pure pitch mode. Okay. We said that this is not a very desirable thing because we are not going to sit at the center of gravity location, and the front and the rear center of gravity location may be slightly behind, okay, behind the, usually in the car it will be slightly behind the front seat, okay, but it may vary from car to car. It's slightly behind the front seat, or almost so maybe 1/3 of the distance between the front and the rear seat. We can calculate that. in fact, one of the exercises you can see is how to calculate the moment of, or how to determine the moment of inertia from a simple experiment, position of the moment of inertia, A and B, good experiment to do. So, in which case, if I am going to sit on either side, okay, and if it's going to bounce and pitch for any small disturbances, whether in the front or the rear, then I'm not going to be very comfortable. Okay? So, this is not a very desirable mode. All of you know how to calculate the natural frequencies. I am not going to do that because of lack of time, but we can write down the natural frequencies, two natural frequencies for this by writing down, okay. For example, for the uncoupled case, uncoupled case, you can write down the two natural frequencies to be root of d1, root. So that's the two natural frequency. Please do not confuse between this stiffness. This A was multiplied in one of the earlier classes with another stiffness, C alpha. Okay, don't get confused between the two. Okay, this is a different K. This is the stiffness in the vertical direction, nothing to do with C alpha F and C alpha R. Okay, so do not get confused with that. Right. So that is the uncoupled case. As I said, not of great interest. Anyway, if you want to calculate, you can calculate it like that. Of course, d2 is equal to 0. Now, let us look at how to calculate the natural frequencies for this, and all of you know it. I am not going to write down too much on that. Okay, I can assume a solution of the form theta is equal to theta A into e power I omega n t, and z is equal to z a e power I omega n t. I'm just going to substitute that into my 1 and 2. This is the thing, and then write down the equation of the form d1 minus omega n squared za plus t2 theta a is equal to 0. Substitute it. You will note that when I differentiate this 2 times, I get that omega n minus omega n squared, and that's the reason why I have a minus omega n squared here. And d2 by ry z plus d3 minus omega n squared theta a is equal to 0. Okay. So what's the next step? If I have to, nothing difficult, just substitute it. So what's the next step? I want to find out the natural frequencies. What's the next step? Yes, take the determinant of this. Okay, write down the determinant. There's a characteristic equation. Write it down in terms of omega n power 4, and then take the two roots for omega 1 squared and omega 2 squared. Okay, so that's straightforward, and I'm going to write down the final result for these two, omega n squared and omega. I'll call this as omega n1 squared and omega n2 squared, the two natural frequencies. Right? Any questions? Pretty standard stuff. So I will write down omega n1 squared is equal to half into d1 plus d3 minus root of 1 by 4 into d1 minus d3 squared plus d2 squared divided by ry squared, and omega n2 squared is equal to half into d1 plus d3 plus root of 1 by 4 into d1 minus d3 squared plus d2 squared by ry squared. Right? Any questions? So these are the two eigenvalues. So the corresponding eigenvectors or the mode shapes for these two natural frequencies, okay, can be calculated by substituting it and determining Z and theta, okay, at the two natural frequencies. Interestingly, this is what is the result you get if I now get at omega is equal to omega n1 is equal to d2 by omega n1 squared minus d1 and Z by theta at omega is equal to omega n2 is equal to d2, of course, divided by omega n2 squared minus d1. So in other words, this gives that the ratio between the bounce and the pitch mode, okay, bounce and the pitch, that gives the ratio. In other words, if I now just represent this by a straight line, my vehicle, the sprung mass, and this happens to be the center of gravity location, then the oscillations would be about a node for the first natural frequency, something like this. Let us say that this distance is L01 as in Wong, that's the distance, okay, where we have what is called as the node, where the point does not move. So the oscillation is about this. How do I find out this point? Yeah, no, from this I've already written down the mode shape. Okay, I've substituted, this is a very standard 2 degree of freedom problem. All of you have done this in your vibration course. I'm not going to repeat it. So how do I find this out?
Z by theta is the radius.
Exactly. So this I can substitute it by, or in other words, this is equal to L01 multiplied by yeah, so approximately theta, okay, divided by theta is equal to d2 divided by omega n1 squared minus d, right, from which you can find out L01, right. The same fashion you can get L02 by substituting it in the next one, and in which case actually the oscillation is going to be, okay, something about another point. Okay, that oscillation is going to be about a point which is at the rear. Okay. That is for omega n2, right. So this, if I can keep it in such a fashion that the two nodes, this would get excited when the vehicle goes, the rear wheel goes over a bump, and the second one gets excited when the front wheel goes over a bump, and so on. So if I can keep in such a fashion that the front wheel bump doesn't affect the rear guy and vice versa, then I have to have these nodes at the seat locations properly, right. You can further extend it, you can simplify it, you can express this in terms of Ry squared and so on. I leave that to you because we have a lot more to cover in this subject, but this is the essential aspect of looking at it in a very simple terms from the point of view of a half-car model. Okay, right. Any questions? I'm sure that you have done a very similar problem in your vibration courses, so that's the reason why I'm not going to continue. Maybe the same problem you did. Okay. Now, with all this, you have a number of questions. I know a few of you asked me. The question is that what is the excitation? You're talking about natural frequency, you're talking about other things. How do I now characterize the excitation for this vehicle? Okay. Till now, what you are doing is essentially extending your knowledge on vibration. Regular your 101 course on vibration. But we'll shift and we will see and enter into the realm of what is called as random vibrations. And actually that forms the basis for understanding the noise vibration NVH of the vehicle. Okay. So we have to go through what is called as the random vibration analysis, and that's what we are going to do now. I'm going to pick some of the concepts which probably you would have studied in your random vibration course. Sorry, I don't think many, there's an elective, but I don't think you would have done a random vibration course. So maybe some probability course which you have done, okay, you would have learned some of the things that I'm going to pick up, right? Okay, so what is that we are trying to study now? Assume that you do an experiment, you have a profilometer, okay? You go and look at the road profiles across, say, a number of sections. Say, for example, you go to one of the highways and then measure the road profile, go for a small length, for some length, possible length, and then go to another place, measure it, go to another road, measure it, and so on. So when you start measuring these things, okay, then you would notice that obviously, suppose I plot, say, the heights of what you have very accurately measured by, say, a laser profilometer or whatever it is. So you will have, for the first measurement, it would be something like this. The second measurement would be something like this, and so on. Okay. So maybe a third measurement would be something like this. In other words, what essentially from the language of probability you've done is to do an experiment, and you are in the process of what is called as observation, right? So how do I, in other words, the key factor here is how do I express this surfaces from a random processes perspective. In other words, we have to understand what is a random process, how do I express this as a random process, and more importantly, what are the statistical parameters which govern the random process.
So why is this actually happening in this case? Is it the road itself is like that, or is it?
Yeah, but no two roads can ever be the same, right? Because the gravel that is used, the stones that are used are not of the same size. Everything is not the same. Okay? Any surface, for example, whatever be the surface, you have tally surf. For example, if you want to measure the surface roughness, okay, you will get something like this. You are not going to get a smooth one line. Okay? Of course, depends upon what is the magnification you go to. Right? So that's why I said that we have a laser profilometer which is used and get this. So you will never get a straight line, obvious, because of so many undulations that are there which are randomly distributed. Okay.
The reason for studying this is to see the effect of these uneven.
Yes, good question. Why am I studying this? I have expressed all these things. Okay, why am I studying this? Because this is going to be my input. Okay, this is going to be my input. Certain statistical parameters which I am going to now explain will form the basis of input to my system which I would call as the linear time invariant system. You would notice that we are going to develop certain statistical parameters, and that statistical parameters of the input, which is the road, and the output, for example, the seat location accelerometer, okay, acceleration at the seat location, for example, would be related through a very simple frequency response functions. Okay. So in order to do that, I have to study what is the input. In simple words, what it simply means is that you would have done that in ergonomics course. All of you took an ergonomics course, right? And you would see that there is a tolerance level, okay, or perception of tolerance to a human being, or the perception of fatigue and so on, is proportional to the acceleration levels that you are given, right? And depending upon the acceleration, you can withstand that for a longer time, shorter time. We'll go into all those details a bit later, okay? So in other words, if I have to look at ride comfort, ultimately that is my area of interest. If I have to look at ride comfort, I have to look at this ride comfort from the point of view of these statistical parameters, which will form an input into my linear time invariant system. And what is my output? They are the acceleration levels, okay, at various points in the car, and that would be related to my well-being, and that's how we are going to study the ride comfort. So in other words, you would have noticed that if you drive in a very what we call as a kacha road, okay, then the vibration levels are going to be higher. You're going to feel, you're not going to travel in that road, for example, 4 hours. Say for example, from here to Bangalore, you have a road which is a totally kacha road. By the time you end up there, okay, your bones are all not intact. You will feel so tired. On the other hand, right now the beautiful road that you are traveling, you need not even stop anywhere. You can travel for the next 5 hours in order to reach Bangalore, if the traffic is quite benevolent to you, right? So in other words, this input is going to affect your ride comfort, okay? And the whole idea of this design of suspension system, for example, is to see to it that you isolate, okay, to a great extent, or make your life more comfortable. We won't be able to go through the complete process in this course because, as I said, this forms the basis for NVH. A lot more needs to be done. It is not only just the vibration levels, but also noise which is generated by the road. Okay, the road contribution for noise is very high. Okay, so 25 decibel of the total 60 decibels or something like that may be from the road. In other words, the road contribution is extremely high, right? It's 25 decibels. Right? I have a PhD student who works on noise, and his major aim is to find out, for example, what is the vibration level at the knuckle position and relate it to what's the noise that one hears inside. Okay, so these things are not only going to affect the vibration, but also the noise. More importantly, tire is going to interact with the road, and that is going to create noise. Tire noise is a major issue, okay, major issue. Apart from the engine, the tire, these two are the culprits for noise. And so how this is going to have an effect on the tire and so on, all these things become important. In other words, unless I characterize the input, I won't be able to study the output. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So we'll go into a very short introduction into random vibration with random processes before we look at the other things. Okay, let us now define certain quantities which are common in probability, from where we will take off into random processes. We'll be slightly more formal. Okay, I can take off from here because you've done a course in probability, so I'll be slightly more formal in this. We had already defined what is an experiment, what is an observation. The result of an observation is what is called as the outcome. The result of an observation is what we will call as the outcome. The set of all possible outcomes is what is called as the sample space. So I do an experiment, okay? I observe, and then I look at an outcome. Okay? And the set of all possible outcomes is the sample space. Okay? Let us call the sample space as S, and it can be continuous, okay, or it can be discrete. Let us define a very simple continuous space, sample space S. Let's say that we start the class at t is equal to 0. Okay? So students start coming in. They are free to come in for 50 minutes. Not in this class, but nevertheless, usually people walk in, okay, for 50 minutes. So I'm going to now observe, okay, and my outcome is the time that people start coming in. So let me write down that. From that, let me write down the sample space. Sample space now consists of all possible outcomes. Tau, where tau is assuming that the students don't come before the start of the class, which has never happened. Okay, 0 to 50. Okay, so this is actually the sample space. This is a continuous sample space. Right. We call as event a subset of the sample space. Okay, an event is the subset of the sample space, yes. For example, I can say that A1 is an event where A1 covers tau, which is less than or equal to 5 minutes. So A1 is an event, all that which is within the first 5 minutes. I can define A2 to be tau, which is 5 less than tau less than or equal to, or greater than, tau is greater than 5 less than or equal to 50. So these are events. Or events can be this continuously as tau itself. Now a random variable, note this carefully, a random variable is a function. Random variable is not a variable in the strictest sense, but is a function which actually maps these events. Let me call that as the event space. There are a number of events and so on. Random variable is one which maps this event to a real line. So basically random variable is a function. But though we loosely later use random variable to be a variable, but actually in strictest sense of the word, random variable is a function. Okay. Now we can assign, the next step is we can assign a probability, okay, to this random variable. In other words, from here I can assign a probability. Many times probability, look at this, there are 3 steps. One is an event to a random variable, then from here to a probability. So I can say that the probability of this event happening is 0.5 and this event happening is 0.5. So the total probability of course is equal to 1. Clear? So random variable is that function, and then from here I can map it to a probability through a probability function. Instead of that, it is also possible to look at a distribution. Instead of defining it through that, okay, you can also put probability directly to the event as well. Okay, to the event as well. Right. So now let us extend this. Let us extend this and see how we are going to deal with the profiles that we had measured in the road. The reason why we did this is because we can apply the rich random processes, the mathematics behind the random processes, okay, to a road profile and understand random vibration, from a very mathematical sense. Let us say that I have taken, okay, a number of readings. Let me call these readings by zeta, okay, say R, yes, where S denotes the distance, okay, from the origin. I start a strip, I take readings from the strip, that is the S, and I take another strip and another strip and so on, okay. So, and I take a number of such readings, so that this I would call as zeta 1s, this I'll call as zeta 2s. Let me not put that in a bracket, zeta 2s and so on. So there can be infinite such zetas, okay, which have two things, two notations. One is R and other is S. Okay. So this is what is called as a random process. In other words, a random process is a family of random variables. It's a family of random variables. Okay, family of random variables, and are usually, like in this case, have two indices, R and S.
So,
right?
S
Yeah.
here stands for the
Length.
position along S.
Length. Okay, it can be time, for example. You can look at it as a time, but you can look at it as. This actually gives the roughness of the road. Okay, roughness of the road. And note that if I take any, let us say that is S1 and that is S2 and so on. Okay, just because I measure at one location the surface roughness, say for example if I know S1, it is not possible to predict or to say that this would be the same as S2 or it is 4 times, if I measure here, it is, I can't say that this would be some 4 times S1 or the same as S1 and so on. Okay? So I have to now bring in a statistical basis for this, what I am measuring, okay, at these positions. It's loosely called, that psi what I am measuring is what is loosely called as the random variable. Okay? What I am measuring here is what is called as the random variable. Right? Okay. So now let us put this together. Let us just develop this. So in other words, though random variable is a function, we are going to call what I measure as the heights at various positions as the random variable, so that, okay, there is a mapping in the sense I make an experiment, I make the observations, and then I call this heights as the random variable, and the random process is the collection of all these things, the ensemble of all that is possible to be done. Okay, let me put this together and let us see what we mean by each of these terms and how we are going to statistically understand this process. Okay, let us now put this in one go. In other words, one yes. Right? Okay. One of them would be like this. First one, second one would be like this, the third one would be like this, and so on. Okay, those are the zeta 1, zeta 2, zeta 3, and so on. Clear? So let us let's give zeta r, yes, r is equal to 1, 2, and 3 is what is called as the sample function. It is a sample function. When I put this into a bracket r, that means that it's the ensemble, all of them. Sometimes it is called as also as the realization of sample function or realization. The collection of all these things is what is called, collection of all those r's is what is called as the ensemble. Okay, so yes.
When you say the, or somebody looking at variations across a road and variation between roads.
Yes, absolutely. So the beauty of that, that's why we are coming to that. So look at that. This heights vary along the road. In other words, in one of the sample function, okay, they are not constant, they are varying. So for example, that shows how it varies. And also varies, okay, across roads. Okay. Now, how do I study this? That's the whole process, the random process. Okay. So what are the statistical parameters that I can use it? Let us now put down, let's give some notations. So right now our most important thing is random process. Random process is a collection of all these things. Okay, and the sample function is one of them, and that ensemble is the complete collection of whatever that's possible, is what is called as the ensemble. Okay, now let us say that let zeta j indicate the value, okay, of this roughness, say in terms of height, for a particular distance Sj. So as you rightly said, the question is, what is Sj? Say for example, it can be S1. The question is, how is the roughness, okay, distributed over this, at every point in that whole ensemble. Okay. So in other words, that variable, this variable has a statistical properties, number one. Number two, that's one thing. The other thing, the statistical property I'm interested in is, as I vary S, how does this height, this roughness changes with that length. Okay? So these are the two things I'm going to study. Right? I'm also going to look at certain important characteristics of random processes, like stationary, whether it's a stationary random process, and whether it is going to be what is called as ergodic. Right? Let us now introduce what is called as probability density function. All of you have heard about this density function, which I'm going to use in order to characterize this random variable, which I called as zeta at the position Sj. Okay? A number of statistical or probability density function is possible. One of the most popular probability density function is the Gaussian function. It's a Gaussian distribution function. going back to the definition of the probability density function, the probability that this roughness value, which I would now start calling as a random variable, is between the values of A and B is given by, how do we write this? Is given by, what am I looking at? What is the probability that it is between, say, 3 mm and 5 mm, right? So is given by integrating the probability density function okay, in that range, and then finding out what is the area under B and A. So in other words, I can plot the probability density function, say for example as a normal or a Gaussian distribution, okay, normal Gaussian distribution or whatever it is. I can plot this as a Gaussian distribution. We'll put down the equations in a minute. One of the major things, is that clear? This is quite straightforward, okay. So probability, that in other words, this is nothing but the area under the curve from A to B gives you the probability. Probability density function gives you the probability versus the tau j, and then you take that area between, say, A and B, and then say that what is the total probability, and from which you get the probability distribution function, okay, as you keep integrating. Okay, suppose I integrate this value between A and B between minus infinity to plus infinity, I get the total probability to be equal to 1. Okay, so integrating this is what you would get a probability distribution function. You can also look at probability density function as the differential of the probability distribution function. Okay, so we'll not go into too much of niceties because we have a lot more to look at. Okay, we are going to look at this whole thing, from the point of view of what is called as expectations. Okay. Now, in order to understand this expectation, let's do a small experiment for the next 1 minute, and then we will extend this to look at what is called as the expectations. Okay. We can't complete a probability discussion without a dice and a coin. Can you? You can't. Suppose I take a dice, okay, and then I'm going to throw the dice, okay, say maybe 6 times I'm going to throw the dice. What is the, in your in the general language, what is the average value that you would get? Like I throw this, look at what first time I throw it is 2, second time I throw it is 1, and so on. Okay, how would you calculate now what is the expected value, as it is called, the average or the mean value? How do you do that? What is the probability that in that dice, okay, it's an unbiased dice, and throw it, okay, what is the probability that I'll get 1 by 6, 2, 3, 4 is 1 by 6. So the probability that I get one of these numbers is 1 by 6. Okay. Tell me what is that value would get. How do I calculate it?
1 into 1 by 6 plus 2 into 1.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sum it up and you will get expected. Right? I'm going to use that in order to define my expectations. Okay, and I'm going to distinguish slightly between what you had learned earlier, say for example as an average and a mean or in other words, the sample in the population. Okay? We will start from expectations in the next class.